Hello, everyone. I am back. First, let me apologize because you guys have been holding me accountable. And I think that on my last video, I mentioned that I was going to upload a video like the next week. And it's been a few weeks, but I'm here and I am going to let you guys know I've been getting like a lot of questions. And as you guys know, I have people kind of local in the community that reach out to me when they suspect that they're having certain autoimmune disease symptoms and symptoms of lupus and fibromyalgia and some other arthritis and other things that are in the rheumatology factor. And so I just thought that maybe I'd sit down and go over kind of like my journey, what my symptom journey was the presentation stage of lupus is, or what are some signs to look for, and also talk about my journey thus far, what hospitals helped me, what doctors helped me, what treatments have helped me, what treatments have not helped me. So if you guys want to stick around, I will let you guys know a little bit more about those specific things that I went through through this 6-year battle with lupus. So first and foremost, the most frustrating thing with lupus and being diagnosed with lupus is that you have to have actively a few numbers of symptoms on the lupus scale. So that may be whether it's the butterfly rash, which I did not present the butterfly rash up until a year or year and a half after I was diagnosed with lupus. Also fatigue and extreme exhaustion. Other rashes on the skin. I've seen other people have little red blotchy marks, and that presented itself a little later on as well. Loss in movement of the legs, the arms, soreness. Those are all signs. And, there are some few others, but those are the ones that I can think of right off the bat that I have had myself. So you have to be showing a number of signs before you are even diagnosed with lupus, which is really, really frustrating because for me, being diagnosed with lupus or even being diagnosed and getting any answers as to what was wrong with me was over a 20-year journey. And I say over 20 years because as far back as I can remember, I have always suffered from heat exhaustion, dehydration, all of those things, fainting, dizzy spells, all of the above, ever since I was probably around 5 or 6 years old. And what would happen was we would go to different attractions like Disney and, water parks and all of those things where I live in Florida. So it's always hot and I would always get dehydrated. I would always faint. I would always get dizzy. During that time, I never needed to go to the emergency room or anything like that. But of course, I'd always ruin, the family day or whatever. We'd have to leave. I'd stay hydrated and monitored. And, I just thought I was better. Also, another thing that I do remember as a child, probably elementary school age, is that I would have morning stiffness in my hands. I just remember being like 5 or 6 years old and just crying in the morning because I couldn't turn on the faucet. And again, I'm a child, so I don't know what's going on. I think that my parents thought that I was just, being a kid, not wanting to get dressed for school or just being, a kid. And I was spoiled rotten at that age. I was still the only child up until like 7.5. So I think they just thought, I wanted attention for the morning. And it's just weird. I just remember having those symptoms, but then they just kind of went away as far as the morning stiffness. The fatigue and the lack of being able to exert myself, all of those things lasted all throughout elementary school. I remember at recess, PE, I was always just tired. Like we would play wall ball and kickball and all of those different things. And I just was more tired than, my average peers. And I just, we used to laugh that I was allergic to the sun because every time I would be out in the sun or be physically exerting myself, I just would get really, really dehydrated and just really, really sick. And back then, even now, there's still a lack of education about lupus. So this is the early 90s. So I had never even heard of lupus. Never known anyone that dealt with lupus other than one person. And she's a family friend of ours, but it attacked her skin mainly. So I just didn't know what this could be. I just thought I was just different in a sense. So probably around middle school, high school, I was active in a few more things. So I always thought I was really, really good at running. Even in elementary school, I'd always beat the boys running and all of those things. I really enjoyed running, but I always in the back of my head, I felt like that just wasn't something I'd be able to participate in because I know that I always get sick in the sun and I always get overheated and all those things. So my parents, they always had this rule that me and my siblings had to be active in some kind of sport or activity. So I chose band. I felt like band was, obviously something that I didn't have to exert myself too much. So I chose band. I played the clarinet. I had no issues with band, obviously, up until my eighth grade, where I did marching band since I attended a middle school, high school. So one practice, it was hot, of course, and I fainted well, it wasn't just me, it was actually like two other girls too. It was really, really hot that day. And it was just a big mess. It turned into all this drama or whatever. But little did we know back then that's because, I had been dealing with those symptoms of lupus and I just hadn't been diagnosed yet. Also in middle school, I cheered and it was just the same instance or same situations. I was always needing water breaks and always just kind of more tired than all of my other teammates. Again, I just didn't know any better, just thought I was kind of just out of shape for some reason. But looking back, it's a little disappointing because there are certain things that I always wanted to participate in. I always wanted to participate again in track, always wanted to participate in volleyball. I'm tall, I'm long. I feel like if I were able to do those things back then, my life would probably be completely different. I think that I would have been a beast in those sports. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate in those. So that kind of sucks. But again, that's why I do what I do because, you hear about these really, really weird cases of young men, just falling out of heart attacks and, these kids falling out at practice and stuff like that. And as soon as I hear those stories, I always know the first thing that comes to mind are those kids have suffered from some type of, whether it be autoimmune disease or some type of heart defect or something. Healthy kids just don't fall out, and die of heart attacks. Something is going on there, and there's such a lack of education about these diseases that, it just, when it does affect you, it comes to some type of fatality, unfortunately, or some type of extreme case, as it did in my case. So thank God that I was able to somewhat live a normal childhood. And I say that because, through this journey, I have met other women and other people who weren't so lucky. They were diagnosed with lupus as a child. And, when I hear their stories are just so unfortunate that certain things were taken away from them because they were battling this disease. So again, lupus did not present itself until after I had gone through a childhood. I was an adult at 23. And so I'll go over a little bit about that journey when my symptoms kind of started changing through the years. So my first ER visit or hospital stay was actually on 4/20/2012. And 4/20 is kind of a funny date. And if you know, you know. If you don't, then maybe Google it. So what happened was at that time, I had probably my freshman year of college, I had started, or what I thought I was having, like anxiety attacks. But I had noticed that I was having like heart palpitations. And what's funny is that, well, it's not funny, but what's a coincidence is that the heart palpitations was something that I had always suffered from or experienced. So a lot of times, like I was saying, as a child, when I would be exerting myself physically, it literally felt like I was like dying, like I was about to have a heart attack. So fast forward again to college. One night, it probably was like 9, 10 o'clock at night. My actual best friend, who was my roommate, she was here back at home. And I was in Fort Myers attending college. And so my one roommate was there, Stephanie. I don't know if Stephanie watches my videos, but thank you, Stephanie. She took me to the ER. And I really didn't want to go, but I just knew like something was off. And one thing about me, I'm a person who pretty much waits till the last minute to go to the hospital. I feel like I can like tough it out and bear with the symptoms. So that night I was like, okay, I have to go to the ER. So I went to the ER thinking like, I don't know, but I was not expecting what is about to come. So, of course, anytime you go to the emergency room and you're telling someone you're having heart palpitations or you're having chest pains, they're going to do all of these tests. So a few tests to kind of ask for or to look for if you are having some kind of chest pains is one, an EKG. And then when they do blood work, they are going to check like your troponin levels. So when my EKG came back, they just saw like all of these elevations through like your heart rate or whatever, I guess, or your arrhythmia. So he looked at that, and then my troponin levels were just like off the charts. So I was not expecting what my doctor was about to ask me, but since it was 420, my doctor thought that I was having a overdose of some kind of drugs, which I don't do drugs. So he just could not believe that that wasn't the case. And I say that because he came to me and told me that if I was a 56-year-old white male, he would have told me that I had had a heart attack and that that's just what it was. But I was a 21-year-old female college student. So I say all that to say that my EKG and my blood work should not have shown or come back the symptoms that it was. So something was wrong. So as he's explaining this, I'm looking at him big-eyed. My roommate is looking at him like, what have I gotten myself into? And I'm completely just looking at him like, sir, I don't know what you're talking about, but can you call my mom and can you call my dad and explain to me what you're saying? Because I don't even know how to grasp this. So he calls my parents. At this time, it's probably like 11 something. My mom, I can't remember if she said she's dyeing her hair or she's perming her hair or something. So she has to get her hair situation together. They had to pack up my younger siblings, drop them off for school the next day, to someone that was going to get them up for school the next day. And then they drove 2.5 hours to Fort Myers to figure out what was going on. So after more, talking with the cardiologist and the doctors there, I was at Fort Myers. What is it called? I think it's Gulf Coast Memorial Center or like Gulf Coast something or another in Fort Myers. And they were awesome. But during my time there, they decided that the best thing for me to do was to have a heart cath procedure. And that's where they go in through a vein or artery in your groin area. I think it's like your largest one. They go in there with like this microchip camera thing, and they go in and you can take like footage or whatever, what's going on inside the heart. So the crazy thing is that this is April, and that's around the time where I was starting to have finals for the semester. And when I tell you guys that this hospital stay taught me probably like the greatest lesson in my life is that life just goes on. Like it doesn't matter if you're 20, 21-year-old and you're laid up in the hospital and they think you're having a heart attack. I had some kind of, I think, English paper to write. I had a test to do. And only one of my professors told me that it was okay for me to come in whenever I get out of the hospital to take the test in office. Only one of my professors. So I was in the hospital again, 20, I can't remember if I was 20 or 20 years old, thinking that I am having a heart attack, but I am still responsible for doing my finals and passing my classes for that semester. So if that didn't make me or break me, I don't know what did. So good thing is I did it. I had no choice. But yeah, that was probably one of the greatest lessons I ever learned. And I'm thankful for that experience because it showed me that sometimes you think that you're so overwhelmed and everything is so over your head, but you literally can get through it and you will get through it. So back to the heart cath situation. From those results, I mean, they came back and told me that I did have inflammation of the heart, but they told me that there's a list of things that cause that. And that's like viral infections, respiratory infections, sometimes when you have pneumonia. And so they just assumed, since at that time I didn't have any other type of issues, but they assumed that that just is what it is. And so I went home after a 4-day stay, just thinking that maybe I had a viral infection or respiratory infection, and it caused like this inflammation in my heart and this arrhythmia in my heart. So probably for the next 2 years, of course, I was under like cardiac follow-up care and stuff like that. And so I still was having like those heart palpitations. Wow, I had to burp. I was still having like those heart palpitations and doing like heart monitors and stuff like that every few months. And so by November of 2014, I actually had been seeing a cardiologist at a hospital in Orlando. I don't know what it was called in Orlando Health or something like that. So they did what's called, it's like a heart cath, but it's a electrophysiology test or something like that. And so basically what they do is they do like the heart cath, but they use something to like try to spark something another in the heart. And so there's like two options. If it does spark something or you do get like some kind of reaction from it, it means like you have, I don't know, some kind of like heart defect or heart issues. And if it doesn't spark anything, it means that you don't have that heart issue, but something else is wrong. So in my case, B came back. And so they knew that I didn't have like a heart defect as far as like in the electrical circuit of your heart, but they still didn't know what was wrong with me. So after all of that, what they diagnosed me with was hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, and it pretty much just means that you have enlarged muscles or inflamed muscles, and it causes like this arrhythmia of the heart or of your heart rate. So they didn't really give me many answers after that, other than to just be following up with a cardiologist and just going from there. So from like 2012 to 2015, I was just under the impression that, I had some kind of heart symptoms or heart issues due to the fact that I just had these enlarged muscles around my heart or whatever. So I just thought that I just had some type of arrhythmia issue until around April of 2015, I started experiencing or started noticing like some other symptoms, such as my fingers swelling. That probably was like the first thing. And what happened was I was on a road trip with my aunt and my cousin, and we were actually talking about rings. We were just talking about like getting engaged and getting married and stuff like that. And so my aunt was showing us her ring, and I tried to put her ring on, and my fingers were so swollen that I couldn't wear her rings. And at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. But now, I mean, that's such a huge thing because I'm like a really, really slender person. I was even more skinny and thin back then. I wear like a 5.5, 6 ring size. And for me not to wear her ring, I mean, that was kind of like a telltale sign that like, okay, something is wrong, but it still didn't hit me. So that was probably like the first thing. Around maybe May of 2015, I noticed that my edges were starting to come out. And still just not thinking, something is going on. Now looking back, those are all kind of signs that you have lupus or you're suffering from some kind of autoimmune disease. So also around that time, May of 2015 is pretty much when I had gotten a new job as a medical receptionist. And, that's not a hard job or anything like that. It's actually one job that I absolutely loved. I loved the people that I worked for and who I worked with and all of that. But I noticed that I was starting to have like I've always had like a sensitive stomach, but a little bit more sensitive, like having irritable bowel syndromes and stuff like that, symptoms after eating, and just like stomach queasiness. Also after work, I would just be extremely exhausted. Like I would get home probably around 6:30, and I would just fall asleep. I would fall asleep in the middle of like someone talking to me. I would just be nodding off. But the weird thing is, after literally falling asleep at like 6 p.m., I would still be exhausted when it was time to get up for work the next day. So just like extreme exhaustion like that is something to look for when, you feel like you may have some type of autoimmune illness or lupus or something like that. So probably around August 2015 is when I went to a primary care doctor about those symptoms. And the crazy thing is, which is something that occurs often, unfortunately, is that getting a referral to like a rheumatologist is something that takes a pretty long time. So I remember him telling me that it was going to be, so this is August, guys. He told me that it was probably going to be like December or January of the next year when I could get into this rheumatologist that he referred me to. Yes. September, October, November, December, January. It's like 5 months. So it was like half a year for me to see somebody. But, he did tell me for sure that he knew that I had some type of rheumatoid issue. He did suspect lupus, and he said that it is something that I will never forget. And I wish that I kept in touch with him because he is kind of important to me, or special to me in a way, because he kind of changed my life. But he told me that he was so surprised that after hearing my symptoms that nobody had ever given me the answers that I had lupus. So I don't know where he is, but thank you if you ever see this video. And so around that time also, I started noticing that I was having night fevers. So again, just I don't know what was wrong with me, guys, or why I didn't suspect something sooner, but I would literally wake up during the night, probably 2 or 3 times. I would have to change my clothes because my clothes were drenching wet. So that's also something to look for: night fevers, night chills. If you're waking up wet, sweating, and you're not going through menopause, that's a problem. So at 23, I definitely wasn't going through menopause. So I was having these night fevers as a sign or symptom of lupus. Also, some things that I noticed were like sore arms and sore legs, and like loss in my ability to open things. So like I couldn't open water bottles or soda cans or jars or anything like that. And actually still to this day, that is something that I deal with. Most people don't pick up on it, but most of my close family and friends, if I'm drinking something, I'm just going to hand it to you to open or whatever. And it's just something that I'm used to at this time. But mobility is, or loss in mobility is something to look for as well. So it was definitely hard for me to walk up the stairs and brush my hair and put my hair in ponytails and all of those things. Those are signs that something is wrong. So look out for those signs as well. But one of the experiences that kind of brought on my presentation lupus flare was, I remember September 2015, me and my family, we attended a Gator game. And, you know, I guess just walking to and from the parking lot and just the hype of the game and all of those things, it must have just been a really, really crazy weekend for me, or just made my body just go out of whack. And so that weekend was the weekend that just made my body go into attack mode. So I had been having like fevers of 103 for a few days, and just having those chills. And I mean, I could not walk, I could not move my arms, I couldn't do any of those things. And so my mom, she just said, enough is enough. We're going to the emergency room and we're just gonna figure out what's wrong. We're gonna stay there as long as we need to until we can get your rheumatologist, until we can go, you know, further into what's going on. And so I thank God for my mom standing up and demanding that I go, because I know for a fact that that is what saved my life. Because when I went to the emergency room, guys, my blood work came back. My autoimmune disease and inflammatory factors were like 10, 15 times the average amount of what they were supposed to be. I ended up staying like half a month in the hospital at Lakeland Regional, and they took great care of me. But I will be honest, when I got there, they were pretty nervous. They were honest about the fact that lupus was attacking my body pretty hard, and it was a case that they didn't see often. And I say that because I had nurses and I had doctors coming to check on me, just because they had heard my story. And so that's something that's touching, and that's something that I do remind myself of when I'm thinking of my journey. So during that stay, one of the first things they did, because they were trying to figure out, was it lupus or was it a muscle disease that falls under like the myositis diseases, which I do have a cousin that has a disease similar. And so they were trying to figure out, like, is it genetic, or, you know, what exactly is it stemming from? So I had to have a muscle biopsy. And from that muscle biopsy results, they found out that my muscles were necrotic, and that pretty much means that my muscles were dead. So my muscles in my legs were dead and not working. So hence the, you know, the lack of ability to move my legs and to walk and to move my arms and all of those things. So I had lost a lot of muscle, which is something that I still deal with now. After the muscle biopsy, which that hospital stay is such a blur to me, and I think that's because I was highly medicated with pain medicine and stuff like that. But I just remember not being able to like shower and stuff like that. Like my mom had to sponge bath me, and just things like that are like really, really touching. And that kind of reminded, I remember when my mom was like washing my feet, and I was like, oh man, this reminds me of when Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And it's just like this funny thing, but such like an inspirational moment at the time. You know, because little did I know I was receiving like this information, but it was still very early in the journey. So I just didn't know what to look forward to, you know. But I couldn't imagine that it would be the journey that was gonna be, you know, come along the way. So from around the time that I was officially diagnosed, which was September 2015 to like 2017, it was kind of the same issues, just battling the same issues, just reoccurring like exhaustion and loss of like my legs, you know, of using like my legs and arms and stuff like that. That was always kind of like the signs that I was having lupus flares, and, you know, the fevers and stuff like that. So some of the things that they treat you with, or the medications that they use, the first thing I was on, and what's commonly used if anything is going wrong with you, is Solumedrol. And Solumedrol is it's a steroid, but it's an IV steroid. So it comes from like the IV drip or whatever when you're in the hospital. And they call it they call steroids the miracle drug in general. But steroids are not good for the body. They're not good for the body at all. But again, that's what treats you when you have inflammation in your body. So I was on Solumedrol every time I was hospitalized. But some of the first medications that they put me on when I left the hospital for my diagnosis were I tried a medication. The first medication I tried was Cept, and it's an immunosuppressant. But it is something that works for a lot of people who have mild cases of lupus. But unfortunately, I was allergic to Cept. And it's kind of a funny story because I had noticed I was getting like these little wart things on my face and on my chest and stuff like that. And I was like asking my mom and my sister, I'm like, do you think this is just a normal side effect? Do you think something is wrong? Like, what's up with this? And I think that they were just trying to be supportive, and they're like, no, I don't think anything's wrong, blah, blah, blah. Well, comes to find out I'm allergic to it. And that was the way my body was reacting to the allergic reaction. So I could not take that. Next, they put me on something called Imuran. And Imuran has kind of been a controversial medication because it is a oral chemo. And so the first time I heard about Imuran was actually Selena Gomez. When she was diagnosed with lupus, she mentioned being on chemotherapy, and everyone attacked her for saying that she was on chemo and said, how dare she, mention being on chemo as if she was on cancer, as if she had cancer and all of this stuff. And that's just one thing that I want to touch on, is that cancer patients do not own the treatment of chemo. Chemotherapy is used for lupus patients. It's used for rheumatoid patients. So people who have arthritis, they also use chemotherapy. A lot of other cases also use chemotherapy as well. So I'm not really sure why there's such like this negative thing, or this idea that only people who suffer from cancer, which cancer is a terrible disease. I would not compare my condition to a cancer patient's ever. But other people do receive chemotherapy as a treatment for them. So I do want to educate people on that. And also, I want to let people know, lupus patients, that first of all, our dosages of chemo and cancer patients' dosages are two different things. We do not receive high dosages as cancer patients. So for us, chemo is not going to be as harsh on our bodies as those patients, which I'm grateful for. But a lot of people that I have talked to that do have lupus, they always say no to chemo, and that's something that I just don't understand. It's a treatment, and it worked for me. It's the only thing that has worked for me, thank God, is the reason why I'm still here today. So I don't want anyone to lose their life because they have this negative connotation or association with chemotherapy, because it doesn't have to be that way at all. I actually just had chemo last week on Tuesday, and I don't really experience any symptoms. I have not had any harsh symptoms as that something that I can't deal with. Like, I had nausea. I always get symptoms of any medication like days later. I don't get it immediately. And I had a really bad bout with nausea the other day, but that's it. That is something that you will be okay with dealing with. So I just want to reiterate, guys, please just don't have like this negative idea about chemo. Try it, and see if it's gonna save your life, if it's gonna work for you. Because one thing that was really important for me was that if I was gonna deal with this disease, that I was still gonna live, a life where I could enjoy my life. I refused to just be like sick and suffering from this disease. So don't feel like you have to suffer. Don't say no to treatments just because you feel like there's like this negative association with it. So I just want to say that. So, but Imuran is a it is a harsh medication. You are going to lose your hair. So I lost my hair around that time. And I was also really thin. I lost a lot of weight, probably over 25 pounds. So I didn't look that great while I was on that medication. And I personally don't recommend it. I recommend chemo if you need it, but not in that form. There are a few different other chemotherapies, but that one is pretty harsh on you. And again, as you know, like Selena Gomez, she lost her hair, and she talked about that as well. So she's a person to research. Again, Tony Braxton, Nick Cannon, all of these people are, out there in the public. They're public figures, and they are people who talk about their disease quite often. So I would recommend researching them and looking at their cases and their symptoms of what they deal with and how lupus attacks their organs. So the next thing is also, so since I talked about Solumedrol being the IV drip, of course you don't receive like IV at home. So they'll send you with prednisone, which prednisone is a common steroid used for everything and above. But I have been on prednisone for 6 years, and it's not the best medication to be on. Again, long-term use of any medication is probably not the best, but it is something that you're going to be on. If you have lupus, you're going to be on steroids because it reduces inflammation in your body. So prednisone is the reason why sometimes you will see me with a huge face, and it's probably the reason why you see a lot of people who have lupus. When you have lupus, you're either going to lose weight because it's very active, which was my issue, why I really don't gain weight, or for some people who have to be on high dosage of steroids. Well, this is kind of a myth. They say that you gain weight because your appetite, you get like your appetite increases or whatever. That never happened for me. I just got really swollen because it's also something called a cushingoid effect, and it swells you here. I have what's called buffalo back, so it swells me in my back, and also it kind of swells me from like waist down, from like waist to thigh range. And so it does affect people differently, but that's how it affects me. So sometimes you'll see me, or you'll see me in pictures and you're like, whoa, who is that? And it's because I was so swollen from prednisone. So I hate prednisone. I be going back and forth with my doctors. I always don't be taking the dosage that I'm supposed to, but I listen to my body. So if I feel like I'm having a flare coming on, then I will go up on my dosages of prednisone. So I'm trying to like think of all the medications that I have kind of been on. But from about 2015 to 2017, I was in the hospital a lot of times, guys. Very frequent hospital stays. But in 2017 is when I noticed that lupus started attacking my lungs. So one person that I know for sure that has had the same experience is Nick Cannon. And he talks quite frequently about it's called interstitial lung disease. And what happens is lupus attacks the lungs, and it causes like this inflammation. And so some of the symptoms that I experienced was just like, I would get like this loss of the ability to just like breathe, pretty much. It would feel like there would be like an elephant, just like a collapsed chest. And also like loss of the ability to talk. I couldn't really talk that much. People would call me in the hospital and stuff like that. And I'm like, I cannot talk. I don't know how to explain, but it takes everything out of you. So in 2017, I actually had a blood transfusion. I went through a few things. And that was a different experience. I can't remember if I've had, I can't remember if I've had one transfusion or two, but I know in 2017 I had one. That was my first one. But at that time I had to be on oxygen and stuff like that. And I had to see a pulmonologist, and it's the interstitial lung disease is kind of a harsh one. So if you feel like those symptoms, or if those symptoms come first for you, please let them know. They'll do x-rays, frequent x-rays for you. And during that time, another sign is that you will pick up on frequent pneumonia. So I dealt with having pneumonia seasonal for about 2 years as well. And there's no other. So unfortunately, when you are battling the interstitial lung disease, you don't really have many options other to be hospitalized, because anytime you're dealing with your lungs, they want to do what's safe for you. So they want to monitor you. They want to make sure your oxygen levels are above, I think it's like 93 or something like that. And they want to monitor you and they want to make sure you're okay. So please never be stubborn about, going to the ER if you can't breathe. That's not a smart idea. So I had plenty of stays with dealing with pneumonia, and stuff like that. And I think during 2017 is when I had started to see a doctor at Shan's Clinic, which is in Gainesville. So let me kind of go or give some advice and suggestions based on my experience thus far, as why I changed, my clinics and hospitals and stuff that I was going through. I felt like in Lakeland was kind of limited to dealing with patients, probably with arthritis, or dealing with patients that had like a mild case of lupus. And from day one, it was very apparent, and doctors were very transparent about the honest situation that I was in. And that is that I was dealing with like a more complex case of lupus. And so they did suggest that I see a doctor at Shan's clinic, which is in Gainesville. So I was riding to Gainesville. Thank God for my mom and my parents for taking me there, during my appointments and stuff like that. So there, I saw a doctor. He was a little bit older, and I think that he approached lupus from a research standpoint instead of a let's treat it, let's get her a medication that I know is going to work. Now, let me just mention that I had never been on Plaquenil, guys. I actually didn't get on Plaquenil until the end of 2018, or the end of 2018. So let me just tell you. Sometimes doctors can think things a little further than they need to be thought out. And they just automatically assume that since my situation or my case was so complex, that Plaquenil would not help me. I don't know why they thought that. I didn't know to think any better, because I'm not a doctor. I'm just a patient. But Plaquenil is a malaria drug. For some reason, it was brought, it became a drug to treat malaria, but for some reason it helps the body not attack itself. So it's commonly used for lupus patients. And I said that to say, still in 2017, when I was seeing him, he put me on a medication called tacrolimus. And tacrolimus is an immunosuppressant, and it is a medication used for people who are getting ready to receive a organ. Again, why that was used, I don't know, but I think that he was approaching my situation to research what worked instead of just giving me what worked. So I just think that he saw me as like a project. Like he just wanted to try this, he wanted to try that, he wanted to try this, he wanted to try that. And eventually I had to go, or I felt like it was best to see another rheumatologist, because I just didn't feel like his treatments were really working for me. So then I went to a rheumatologist that I found from a friend, but he was a little more local. He was in Sebring, which he was a very smart and advanced doctor. But the way that his office functioned just wasn't the best. So I did have to end up going somewhere else. We had a little issue happen. But he did start me on Methotrexate, which is another chemotherapy, but it is an injection. So I had to inject myself weekly with that. And then he put me on a medication called Gamma Guard, which is another infusion that I take, which is the replenishing of antibodies. So they are fake antibodies or they are donated antibodies from other people. And since lupus attacks the body, sometimes it attacks the antibodies, and my antibodies aren't able to replenish itself in my body. So I receive that. At first, I received it every 6 weeks. Now I receive it every 8 weeks. So he put me on those medications, which the methotrexate, it was making me nauseous. I was nauseous for like a year and a half, just vomiting my food up, and it just was a no-go. So eventually, he tried to incorporate Benlysta, which Benlysta is the first drug. It's also an injection. It's the first drug made for lupus. So there have been a few more drugs made for lupus since then. This was a few years ago, but Benlysta is the option for some people as well. So again, I had to leave the office because the office was a little scattered. And at the time I was going through some other symptoms that started occurring. So around December 2018 is when, unfortunately, I started enduring like these symptoms. I noticed that my legs were turning colors, and that probably like between 1 a.m. to like 5 a.m. I was experiencing these shooting pains in my legs. And I went to the hospitals in Severings. I went to some other hospitals, and no one could seem to figure out what was going on with my legs. So around January of 2019, we decided that we were going to try a different hospital, and we went to Tampa General. And I'm so glad that we went to Tampa General, because they were able to figure out what was wrong with me, and they have such advanced doctors that I would refer anyone to them. Definitely rheumatology. They're extremely smart. And I told them when I went there in January of 2019 that I was not leaving until I found out what was wrong with my legs. It was the most excruciating pain I can ever even describe or you could ever even imagine. It felt like I was being like lightning was striking through my legs. And again, at this time, I was starting to get ulcers. So what we came to find out that I have something called mononeuritis. So it's pretty much when you have vasculitis meets like nerve damage. So due to the fact that I was having like poor oxygen and poor blood flow in my legs were trying to breathe. So they were creating like these ulcers. But I was also experiencing nerve pain from the fact that there was no like oxygen and blood flow to my nerves in my legs. So it was just like the worst thing ever. I had these holes in my legs. They had gotten infected. I had to see a wound doctor. I had to see an infectious doctor. I had to have like this medicine ball of antibiotics that I had to change, and I had to like shoot myself with these medications and all this stuff out of this port hanging out of my chest. And it was just a big old mess. 2019, I don't even know how I got through it, but I did. So yeah, so lupus can affect your nerves. It can affect anything. So at that time, also, they told me that, this is my first time hearing this, but they told me that my kidneys, they suspected that lupus was attacking my kidneys. So I had to have a kidney biopsy amongst dealing with things like holes in my legs and wound care and all of this kind of stuff. So they decided that the best thing for me to try was Rituxan. And Rituxan was pretty much my last option for me, because there is another drug that is available. It's called Cytoxan or something like that, which is a chemo. But it's a really strong chemo, and a lot of people, it can cause like sterilization and like just all these types of things. So I just did not want to go that route. I probably never will go that route. I probably will just take my chances of no longer being here before I ever take that route. So for me, Rituxan was the last hope, and it did work. So I started Rituxan in June of 2019. And normally when I take that, I do like I take it in like a 2 week span. But unfortunately back then, lupus had got so out of whack that I had to take it weekly for like a month. But I didn't lose my hair. Nothing extreme happens. I don't really have any side effects aside from nausea. But it worked. And so my legs are okay. I have taken like a few medications for the nerve damage. I took gabapentin, which is a pretty strong medication, but it was causing me to be like dizzy. So they put me on another medication, which is called Lyrica. And Lyrica makes me a little nutty, but that's a story for another day. So I do take it, but I'm going through the process of trying to get off Lyrica. But it helps me. I don't have any type of issues in my legs. My legs are a little discolored. I hate that, but it's okay because I have legs. So I'd rather deal with the fact that my legs are discolored than not have any. So right now, I'm pretty healthy. I just had an appointment with my nephrologist today. And this year has kind of been off and on as far as with my kidney issues. But he did give me great news today. And so he says I am back in remission. And so I'm good to go, guys. But I just wanted to sit down and let you guys know basically that I feel like a lot of people don't advocate for themselves enough. And nobody's going to fight for you harder than you are. So if you receive, some information from one doctor, always get a second opinion, because I'm telling you, I have heard so many things from doctors about myself, and they are sent from God. They are smart. They are sent to help us. But they don't know everything. And I promise you, you probably know your body better than they do. And I say that to say, if I would have believed some of the things that I have been told, and I didn't get second opinions, and I didn't keep fighting and advocating for myself. For one, I had one cardiologist try to put a defibrillator in my heart at one time, and I said no. Come to find out, every time I go to the cardiologist, I get clearance. I'm okay. The inflammation was coming from the fact that I have lupus. So that's one instance. In 2018, I told them something was wrong with my leg. Something is wrong. If I would have listened and I would have said, oh no, I'm just having a lupus flare, I wouldn't have legs to walk on. So that's another situation. You just have to fight for yourself, guys. You can't just take no for an answer when you know something is wrong for you. And that goes for lupus, that goes for autoimmune disease, that goes for any disease. Always get a second opinion. It doesn't matter if you need a third, fourth, fifth opinion. And another thing that I want to point out when it comes to your doctors or treatment plans, if you're not getting the care that you feel like you need and you deserve, find another doctor. I have been to 5 rheumatologists, and I don't care about that. I will go to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 if I need to. But I say that to say, if something's not working, they're not working for you, you don't feel like they're taking your situation serious, you need to find a new doctor. So I just want to be that voice of reason for you guys. I want to be that advocate for you guys. I want to be that tool and that resource for you to get the help you need. Because I don't want anyone to suffer for 20 plus years like I did. I'm not the type of person that, I'm not like a hypochondriac where I want to search for something to be wrong with me. But finding out answers allows you to do something about it, allows you to be treated. So never feel like you're speaking something into existence when it comes to your health. You're not speaking anything to existence or causing yourself any harm. Something is wrong, and you want to be proactive before things get fatal. And I'm just glad that other people were there to advocate for me, because if at some point, if I would have listened to myself, I could have really gone wrong. I probably wouldn't be here, for my mother, first of all, for making me go to the ER and for making me figure out what was going on, for getting answers when we did. So I just want to encourage you guys. I have some more videos in mind. I have some more content in mind, but please let me know in the comment section, and like and share and tell other people, you know, that I'm here to help you guys. So I look forward to my next video. And again, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys later.